I woke to the sound of screaming. My blaster hit my hand, darted from beneath my pillow, and roared. The bathroom door slammed against the wall, a new hole punched in its chest. My DATCOM rang again. It didn't sound so much like shrieking this time. I groaned and shoved myself up from the mattress. The blaster stayed in my grasp. It took 2 steps to reach my desk, and the DATCOM cried out a 3rd time while I read the screen. Section 1 was calling. What could the seekers want? Hello? I said. It sounded like a growl. Sven Nulis? The voice on the other end asked. Who else? It's me. What do you want? I said, do you recall the infestation of werewolf parasites we had last year? I'd worked clean up on that case. The crystal flame ribbons in my aura crackled, and I asked a question I already knew the answer to. What about it? We found another one. And you want me to eliminate the hazardous material? It wasn't a question. Yes. Have you cleared it with Chevalier? I asked. I scraped my finger over the blaster's trigger guard and was rewarded with the sound of metal caressing metal. The head of Section 7 has been notified, and there's an execution order ready for you. Good. I couldn't hunt without an order, and my boss still doubted my psyche could handle the strain of real work. Where am I going? I said. But all the information you need is at the check-in desk. Classified, the seeker said in that sharp, defensive tone. Fine. See you at the scene. I hung up. I shoved my tired self into my gear. A decorator of softer tastes had hidden the cold reality of headquarters from fairer eyes. Main blaster under my left arm. A backup laser at the small of my back, and a knife at each ankle. My usual hunting attire was black on black. The ribbons in their aura told me why each one wore a full face mask. A jacket went over my rig, boots slid onto my feet, and I was out the door, arming my wards when I crossed the threshold. Inside the body of a human, they became rampaging predators, devouring their host in a matter of weeks. During that time, it was possible for the parasite to be spread via droplet transmission, thus the face barriers. But it was the psychological and physiological changes accompanying an infection that required the intervention of an executioner. I crossed the steel-on-steel hallway to the elevator and took it to the lobby. A man in armor made his way over the field. A metal band with the words Section 1 engraved in it circled his left bicep. At the desk across the way, I exchanged my name for an execution order and the keys to a shuttle programmed with the coordinates of the infection scene. The Empire didn't give many missions to executioners who got their partners killed. From the loading dock to planet surface, I rode for an hour, close to home then. A crowd of armor-plated local police met me outside the shuttle's hatch. Not enough to alert even their bearers, but the response was there. This group didn't seem to appreciate sarcasm. Werewolf parasites were blood-borne and aided the shifters in removing waste from the blood. Ease up. He's with me. The crowd parted for him. She had a 100-yard radius to hide in, and it was dark. I much preferred urban hunts. There were more open spaces to herd prey, and the landscape didn't try to attack you. Good of you to join us, Nulis, the seeker in charge said. I shrugged, not like I had anything better to do. But the trees were silent, not even a leaf moved. The forest knew something was here. Tension writhed through the assembled locals, as evidenced by their flailing aura. More than one blaster crept in my direction. The seeker shook his head. Let's get this thing over with. I followed him into a village bordered on 3 sides by forest. It was deserted. If she really was the only victim, the method of infection was most likely the obvious one. Stirred in with all that was a darker odor. Pennies overlaid with things gone sour. I played a game of hot and cold with my nose even as I kept my other senses open for new information. Caught early enough, the parasite could be purged. All the asymptomatic locals were probably being subjected to treatment just in case, leaving me to deal with the obviously infected. We set up an electrified perimeter to keep her within 100 yards of the village, the seeker said. One of my eyebrows crawled into my hair. Her? The only known infected is a 16-year-old local girl. We're investigating to find the method of exposure, he said. I forced myself not to smile and pat his head. Have you sighted her recently? I asked, instead of inciting an argument. The ribbons in her aura were tattered and decaying, the rot most prevalent around her left shoulder. Not since she fled into the trees, he said. My body took the sloppy terrain as if I could see every dip and obstacle. My nose wrinkled. But the Empress had spoken, and I went where she bid, making war regardless of the location. That was my duty as an executioner. I drew my weapon. See you when the hunt's over. Then I let the trees fold around me. For the moment, I forgot my sight, instead pushing my other senses into the dark. My ears picked up the crunch of boot-shoed feet moving over gravel, the gentle rattle of armor moving against itself, and breath hissing through a respirator. Instead, the round sliced through the tumor of flesh claiming her left shoulder. I took a deep breath, testing the air. Frightened trembles crawled up her spine and through her aura. The moon was light enough to see by, even with my human sight. The scent of soil and foliage caressed my nostrils. I smelled fur and chill and fear, blood rot. Dark blood vessels pressed against the ivory flesh, crisscrossing the rivers trickling down from her wound. More vessels crawled up her neck and cheek. The rotting blood had blown the vessels in her left eye, staining the white with darkness. The shifting mass had ripped out of her dress, leaving the garment in tatters. My prey was close. "No one cares what you want," I said, pressing back the trigger. I slid farther into the forest, boots touching the ground in silence. Her voice had the edge of the whine a submissive Volf will give a belligerent alpha. A twig snapped. She swept past them as if they didn't exist. I was still in motion when I pulled my blaster back to firing position. Rounds peppered her right side. My head darted in its direction. There was barely a half-inch of water between the tip of my nose and the surface. I punched and kicked out at her, but the extra weight given to her by the parasitic mass kept her body firmly seated above mine. I raked the new weapons down the arm, pinning me. The water went black with her blood, but it might as well have been a mile as far as my animal brain was concerned. Tissue bubbled down her left arm, doubling it in size. The howling beast that was my prey thrashed about. Its human half kept trying to cover the wound with the opposite hand only to incite fresh pain and send it screaming again. Claws split her fingertips, spraying dark blood onto the sand. Aura flickered across my vision, fleeing farther into the trees. I hate it when they run. She jerked away, making that screaming roar as the flap of tissue tore the rest of the way off in my grasp. I threw myself after her. Branches leapt out of the dark, slashing at my face and neck. With her gray matter splattered over the sand, I said, "No one tries to fucking drown me." Fiery pain erupted across the front of my body, angling up toward my neck. Its force threw me into the water on my back. The demon half of my sight scraped away the darkness, allowing me to see the pale, misshapen form I was chasing. With cases like this, it was hard to tell my boss thought my mind was fragile. Under normal circumstances, no human could have outrun me. But one werewolf parasite made the paranormal half of my blood irrelevant. I brought up the report on a holoscreen and felt an ugly little grin cross my lips as I read. People couldn't possibly be this stupid. Giving them a description of where the scene was located earned me a shower, change of clothes, and bandages. I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. Which is why I carried weapons. My blaster came up and roared. Only a lucky dip in the terrain saved her from a head wound. Black blood splattered. She screamed. It was a cross between the shrill shriek of a frightened girl and the roar of a wounded werewolf. Her pale form darted to the right, tripping over something in the brush and tumbling down an embankment. I followed in a more graceful fashion. She scrambled to her feet, hitting the edge of the water as my boots touched level ground. "No, no, no," she whispered. I leveled my blaster at her head. The tumoresque protrusion pulsated, wriggling as if something lived just beneath the skin. She spun to face me, eyes grown too large for her face. "I don't want to die," she said. I had about as much sympathy as the alpha. There were reasons humans and paranormals shouldn't mix that had nothing to do with tradition. She darted fully free of the round this time, fury lighting her eyes on fire. Her scream was all rage. I crushed the trigger. My blaster barked out a series of rounds. Bloodied claws raked at my face. I ducked to the side. Metal screamed as her claws scraped along my bicep, taking a hunk of leather jacket and shirt with them. She roared again and lashed out with her great, clawed hand. The blow took me in the sternum. I heaved out the air in my lungs. She was only a moment behind. Her clawed hand circled my throat, pressing me into the muddy bottom. My body flailed, primal panic overriding all my training. Metal screamed as my will transformed my fingertips into claws. My lungs screamed for air. I dug my claws deep into the meat of her arm and ripped with all the strength left in my body. I shoved myself out of the water, air tearing at my lungs as I forced it into my chest. Even as my chest heaved, I brought up my blaster. The weapon steadily tracked its prey at the skull level. I pulled the trigger. She went down. I shoved to my feet, moved to examine the body, and added 2 more shots to the ventilated skull. The cleanup team was waiting for me when I stepped out of the trees covered in the evidence of my battle. "Thanks for the help, Nulis," the seeker in charge said. I shrugged. "Just doing my job." "Most people wouldn't be able to take on a job like this," he said. "That's why they called in the Reaper," I said. "I'm more than most people. I'd also done more than my fair share of mercy killings since my partners passed through Death's door." Official work done, I returned to headquarters in my bed. A few days later, the results of the investigation came back. With a few taps on the surface of my desk, my prey had had a werewolf lover who was now subject to an executioner S-blaster for almost starting an epidemic. One night of rough sex, and he'd lost his girl and his life. I guess love really can kill. I still prefer a blaster. Less collateral damage.